everyone. My name's Cindy. I'm from Relentless Hope. I am the founder and director. We are a nonprofit organization that helps those who have been ritually abused and child trafficked. We are in the Relentless Hope studio today, and we are welcoming our wonderful guest, Dr. Sylvia Pack. She's all the way from New Zealand. Dr. Pack has a PhD in psychology. She's also had a 26-year prison ministry, and she has also been a survivor of ritual abuse herself. So we are excited to have her. And of course, I have our co host, Sherry Bergraff. So lucky to have her here. Sherry is going to welcome us in with a prayer, and she is also going to do an introduction to Dr. Pack. So without further ado, let's get started.
Thank you, Cindy and Sylvia. It's so good to have you here. I will go ahead and get us started with prayer. Lord Jesus, we thank you for all the healing that you do for each of us, not only the survivors who have had ritual abuse, but just all of us need healing, Lord. And we thank you that you are the healer and that you came to set the captives free. Thank you that we can have Sylvia with us today. I think of her as Sylvia because she's my friend, but she is Dr. Sylvia Pack, and she has an incredible testimony and just the life that you have given her. I just ask that your healing and glory would shine through everything that she says and in her life to give others hope and to see the victory that you have won in her life, and that would give hope for others as well. We ask for you to protect the technology and be with every survivor, every person that will hear this recorded uh, podcast, and that you would just help them to hear exactly what you want them to hear, and just give us peace so that we can just feel like we're chatting with friends because we are friends. And we thank you that Jesus, you are our friend. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Dr. Sylvia Pack, I have had the opportunity to know you, and it was just such an incredible opportunity, not just for me, but for everyone that's going to hear you, to have you here today, all the way from Wellington, New Zealand. Welcome. Would you like to just tell us more about yourself so that Cindy and I don't do it all for you?
Okay. Well, I just like to say it's an honor and privilege to be here today with you two. I know this group is international, and I think you've been responsible for a lot of healing for survivors. And I've heard all about the high quality of the work that you, Cindy, do as executive director of Relentless Hope. And I know you, Sherry, were a foundation member and you work alongside Cindy. So it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here today. I'm just really grateful to be asked. Thank you for having me.
When I first met you, I was just like amazed at the books that you had written. And you are actually on your third book, correct? Would you
I've
like
just,
would you like to tell us about that?
yes, I would. I've got my two books here. That's the first one I did,
Before
which was How to Heal from Satanic Ritual Abuse. And I use the word satanic because it is satanic. And so often today, people just say ritual abuse or mind control. It's as if everyone's afraid to mention the word satanic. So I've got it on the front of my second book, which is How to Triumph Over Satanic Ritual Abuse. I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm a Bible believing Christian, and I believe we need to emphasize the fact that there is an enemy out there, Satan, and he's the one who's behind all this ritual abuse. The book that I've just finished is called How to Counsel the Survivor of Satanic Ritual Abuse, and it's just gone online yesterday, actually, and it completes the trilogy.
Nice. Is that on
Um,
Amazon?
that's on
It's
Amazon.
awesome. Awesome. Okay.
And I wrote
Congratulations.
Yeah.
you. I wrote it because when I was at university, I realized that I loved psychology, and I wanted to get the top marks, because if you do, you get scholarships and you don't have to pay for your fees, which is lovely. So I was slaving away. And then I realized that if I talked about Christianity or my views from the Bible, I would be discriminated against. So I had to be quiet there about my Christian faith. I still remember the head of the department walking around the classroom talking about how he believed there were some people who still believed in creationism. And like, this was, and as I believe in creationism, I mean, that was an example. So, I mean, at uni, I felt I had to be all psychology and no faith. And then when I was at church, it was like the other way around, because sometimes the minister would make jokes about psychology as if psychology was some sort of aberration, some sort of evil in our modern world. And the only thing that mattered was Christianity. So when I looked at writing a book that was for counseling the SRA survivor, it was like I had my feet on two wobbly icebergs. One was the Christian faith, and the other was psychology. And I was trying to get the best out of both and bring them together. And the result is the book. And Christians seem to love it. The few non-Christians I've asked about it really dislike it and find it quite offensive that I should take me so many answers from the Bible. So that's the book of how to counsel. It's the Christian approach.
I love the
Well,
fact that you intersected the Christian with the psychological, the
Yeah,
psychology, because they
definitely.
do overlap.
They
How
do.
beautiful.
Mm. I definitely believe they do. And I mean, there's been some, I mean, to say that Christ is not part of it all, is to try and keep the spiritual out of it, is just so two-dimensional, I believe, when it comes to counseling. But on the other hand, some Christians who won't accept any psychology, like some Christians won't accept the fact that there are alters or parts or littlies when it comes to DID. And instead they say they are demons and they want to cast them all out. And I believe that's really wrong.
Yeah.
But, you can get, that's just a mistake some Christians make, I think, by not
Yeah.
including psychology. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they can go to from one extreme or the other, like the Christians, like you mentioned, can be like, oh, it's all demons, not parts. And then, like some of the people in the the clinical side, like they don't want to put any of the spirituality in there unless it's not God or Jesus related. It's like they want to leave God or Jesus out of it. And it's like, I believe
Mm.
that's where all healing comes from, is from Jesus, our healer. And God can
Yeah,
heal people even before they accept Jesus.
I believe so. I agree with you on that. And the other thing is that without Christianity, some healing is very hard to achieve. For instance, a lot of people who go through SRA, that's SRA meaning satanic ritual abuse, they feel tremendous guilt. And in fact, I think they always do. They carry this tremendous feeling that they've done wrong when it was all forced on them. Of course, they haven't done wrong and they're not to blame, but they feel the guilt anyway. And I remember this conversation with some psychologists in another group who were saying they had this problem. This one person had a client, they had gone through the cognitive aspect of it all and talked to them and said, you're not to blame. These were adults who were forcing you as a child. And they
Right.
understood that cognitively, they understood the whole process. They knew they were not to blame, but they still felt guilty and they still felt terrible guilt and the burden of it. And the only cure really was to pray about it and just say, okay, supposing this was a sin, supposing I was to blame, I'll confess it all to Jesus and I'm guaranteed forgiveness. So for a client like that, that is the answer. But a secular counsellor can't deliver that answer. The person remains guilty. They remain heavily weighed down by all they've experienced.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's so true. That's an excellent point you bring up, Sylvia. I think it's so neat that I feel like this isn't just a podcast. I feel like it's a debut of your book, and and we can celebrate that with you and share. I'd like for you to share more about how you got to the place where you wrote these different books, and especially how to counsel the survivor of satanic ritual abuse, because you're putting both the Christian and the psychology elements together. And I think that it's so important to do that.
Yeah, I really love psychology. But what people tend to forget is that it's a changing science. And although, I mean, what's an example? When I was doing prison ministry, back in the day, when it was just, the DSM was just the 5th edition, it wasn't text revised. They believed that, let me remember, these prisoners, every time the men entered the prison, they were given a psychological test, a very brief test, to find out if they had antisocial personality disorder. And that was an inflexible access to diagnosis. It meant they were that way for life. They believed it. This is what psychologists believed then. And it was only, a decade ago, maybe more. But they believed that if men tested positive for this test, and it was only about 10 questions, it was a really short test, then they were incurable. And 80% of the prisoners who came in tested positive that they had antisocial personality disorder. And it meant they would always be insensitive to other people's pain. You couldn't cure them, okay? And that's a very serious sort of thing to say about anybody. And they would leave, and this would be on their record like a rubber stamp. And wherever they went, it would be known that the psychologist had tested them and found they had antisocial personality disorder. Okay, time passes, and the text revised edition came out. It's no longer an inflexible disorder after all. Now they realize you can work with these people and they can change. But back then, it was hard and fast. They're done for, basically. Lock them up, throw away the key. There's no point in trying. So people forget, psychology does change, and that's good. We live and learn. It's not totally correct at any point because it's a change in science.
That or the power of God comes in and changes the person.
Yes.
Right? There are
Yes.
miracles. People can change. People can heal.
Yes.
So that's, yeah. The only
Absolutely.
thing I heard that can't happen, and again, with Jesus, we know it can happen, but I've read that a pedophile can't change. Is that true?
That's a really interesting point. I looked at that quite a lot when I was studying
Yeah.
psychology, and there are a lot of different methods that people look to try and cure pedophilia. But apparently, then, as far as I can tell from all I've read, the only one that works it's a little like the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. These men admit that they are pedophiles and that they can't change it, and they meet together and they support each other and they talk about it, and they even though alcoholism is a totally different thing, it's the same process of making an absolute decision not to ever go there again, and they support each other. I've heard that that works. But
So like
I,
using the same protocol as sobriety, they're actively admitting that, they do this and they have a problem, and then using like a 12-step recovery model is that how they do it then to stay in, to keep from doing it,
I've heard of
basically.
I've heard of it working, but to be honest, I've never read of any. I suppose it could, but I've never read of it of someone actually being able to change.
I've never heard of it either, having anybody have a change.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hearing what you've said so far, we haven't even gotten into much of your story. It's like here you have a unique background of, the 26 years of prison ministry, in on top of your, the fact that you survived satanic ritual abuse, and that you're a Christian, and you have your PhD in psychology, and you're combining all of that together. That's such a well-rounded place that you come from,
Mm.
to have a unique perspective. Um, this is
Oh. It was the prisons really did help me a lot to open my eyes and so on. But one thing that I really realized in prison ministry is that the general public and the government has a lot of sympathy for child sexual abuse. And in our country, the counselling for child sexual abuse is paid for by the government. It's as well as this private practice. When I worked with groups of women recovering from sexual abuse, that was paid for by the government. And in the prisons, occasionally I would meet people who had suffered satanic ritual abuse, and they could not get counselling for it because the government only had a tick box for child sexual abuse. And that's the reason a lot of satanic ritual abuse goes unreported, because it's not illegal to worship the devil. Satanism as such is not a crime, but the child abuse is a crime. So there's a tick box for that. And if the police meet someone who suffered satanic ritual abuse, they may not even note down the fact that it was Satanism, because it's not illegal to worship the devil. But they will note down that this child was abused and so on. So, oh, my husband just bring me a cup of tea, a cup of coffee.
Oh, how sweet.
He's a good
That's
man.
so, yeah. That's so interesting to me, not in a good way of interest, but like the
Yeah.
fact that the government will pay for therapy for survivors of sexual abuse, but
Yeah.
then they don't make the distinction that satanic ritual abuse includes sexual abuse. As a, it's like they just categorize it, from what I can hear, as satanic ritual abuse instead of like including sexual abuse in that.
It's the other day there was a whole lot of people. Well, actually, not very many. I think it was about 6 or 10 people arrested in Australia for satanic ritual abuse, and I think it was the first time I'd seen it mentioned in the media. Well, it's probably also the first time I've seen it mentioned, and they said it was part of an international ring. And that was very encouraging that they'd actually said this is satanic ritual abuse. It's not just pedophile rings, it's satanic. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
truth coming out.
Yeah, because we have a blackout here in Utah. The media will not touch the subject.
Mm.
They might mention you know, a pedophile that got picked up and is being prosecuted, but they won't say the word ritual abuse. That just doesn't happen. Um,
Right.
I mean, this is the state where the satanic panic began. The terminology for satanic panic started here back in the early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's unfortunate. Although we did in last year, January, February 2025, did pass a law recognizing satanic ritual abuse here in the
Oh,
state. So that is at least one step forward. And
it-
and people can't say, "Oh, it doesn't exist. It's made up. It's fake." You can't say that here in Utah anymore.
because you've
Yeah,
got
because it's illegal.
It's
Whether
now
they
illegal.
prosecute it or not is another
That
thing. But
yes, that's what Utah does. We have a ton of laws against child abuse and child trafficking and sexual abuse of all kinds, but we tend to not enforce those laws,
right.
and that's why we are in such a big mess here in this particular state. Um,
Mm,
and it's not just here. We recognize it's happening everywhere in the US. So I can't just point the blame to the LDS Church or the Catholic Church. I mean, every church denomination, we've heard of something happening somewhere across the US. It's very sad that our churches are in this kind of condition. Um, and that people tend to be more interested in protecting the church's reputation than they do protecting children.
that's
I just,
true.
yes.
yeah, I just, there was a recent article that came out in the news about 200 different leaders in the Assembly of God Church were identified as perpetrating on children and adults within the Assembly of God Church. And that breaks my
Oh,
heart because I grew up in the Assembly
Yeah.
of God Church. So, um, I thought that was the last bastion of Christianity. Well, apparently it's you got to throw that in with all the others. Christ, I think the church is in your heart with Christ in your heart,
Yeah.
so
yeah. I mean, I think this is the church. The three of us meeting is church. It's three
absolutely,
Christians, and
Yes, I
Christ
agree.
here with
totally.
us in the midst because we are Christians. It almost seems to me that the formal churches that we used to depend on so much are the ones where it happens more. You know, pedophiles slip in and gain positions of trust.
Yes. Yes.
Mm,
Unfortunately, seems like there's no church denomination that's exempt.
Yeah.
right,
Um,
right. Jesus.
I still think it's very interesting that New Zealand has the government, pays for survivors to have therapy.
That's
Um,
amazing.
because I feel like I want to advocate for that here in the United States, and I would like to find out more sometime separate from the podcast, probably. Like, how did New Zealand do that? How did they accomplish that? And then bring that here. Um,
Well, we have quite high taxes, and the taxes cover medical bills, and the medical bills include mental health. But that said, about a third of the country has private insurance as well, because there are waiting lists for a lot of what the government provides. At the same time, I think it's a wonderful system. I mean, I had a heart bypass operation in 2020, and I didn't pay a cent because that sort of thing is totally covered by the government, and that comes out of taxes. As far as
wow.
the counselling goes, there is a sliding scale. Most counsellors are paid by the government, and they will top that up by asking their clients to pay a certain amount, depending on how much they're earning. Mhm.
Kind of like what we have here as a copay. So
Yeah.
the insurance will pay 80%. The survivor would have to pay 20%.
Mhm. But those counsellors who counsel survivors of satanic ritual abuse won't usually, as far as I know, mention satanic ritual abuse in their applications for funding. They will only mention what's fundable, and that is sexual abuse.
Yeah.
as far as New Zealand's concerned, though, it doesn't exist. I did my master's thesis on satanic ritual abuse and how it was counselled and what counsellors thought of counselling it in New Zealand. And after it, people were writing to me from all over the country saying, "Oh, I saw your thesis online, and where can I find counselling?" And I did not know. I know the other lady in Wellington who does it, but I don't. People are in denial, and even it's rather sad. I'd really like to, the lovely Zoom groups that we have going, Shari, supporting survivors of
Yeah.
satanic abuse. They're great groups. I would like to start that in New Zealand, but the people have written to me, who've emailed me, I've emailed them back and said, would you like to start a Zoom group to support? But it never takes off. It's like here, everything's serene, everything's calm and peaceful. There is no satanic, there's no satanic temples, put it that way, and there's no satanic ritual abuse. It doesn't exist.
Lots of denial, it sounds like.
Total denial. Yeah, and
I found that to be true in other countries as well, like the Netherlands, which we visited this year. And I don't know about the other countries close by there, but that definitely is true of that.
Yeah, we had a client from Australia, and she says there's nothing in this country to help her out. Her specific case was she was in polygamy. And so her and her children, and including her husband, were trying to get out of the culture, the community they were in. And she had contacted us, and I'm like, I have no idea where to tell you. Because we really just focus on the US, but I did send her to a place in the UK, hoping that maybe they could help her there with resources. But yeah, this seems to be a common problem. So,
yeah. New Zealand is a wonderful place. I love my country very much. And it's got a very chill vibe. Like people come here and they say, oh, everyone's friendly and it's very laid back. And it is. But it has this little downside when it comes to SRA that nobody wants to know. Doesn't happen. This country's free of all that, surely. When I was interviewing people for my master's thesis on counselling SRA, I remember the psychologist saying to me, that couldn't happen here. We're so small. There's only 5 million people. Everyone knows everyone. Well, they don't actually. And, no one would go missing. We'd find them. And she truly didn't believe it could happen here.
well, when your own parents are trafficking you, they're not going to report that you're missing for a few hours. Nobody's going to notice you're missing for a few hours. So, yeah, I hear the same things as well. Because people here will say, if this was really happening, the police would be arresting people and we'd hear it on the news. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The news media is part of the cover up. The police are involved in ritual abuse. They're here to cover up the stories. That's why you don't hear about it. It's very well funded, very kept hidden. So, yeah,
It
we've got
seems
to
very
change that.
common. It seems, yeah, I agree. Seems very common that people think, well, it doesn't happen here, wherever here is.
Yeah.
And it's like they think of trafficking or satanic ritual abuse as something that you would see out in the open or something when it's all hidden. And, it's not like a child needs to be abducted and taken away from their parents to have this satanic ritual abuse and trafficking going on. It's like they can be gone, like Cindy said, a few hours, and it's all hidden, and it's just like the dissociation with the mind control and the parts that don't know anything is even going on. Um, I think of that with you, Sylvia, like, um, as far as like, when did you know that you had been satanically, ritually abused? And would you like to share any of that? Like how you came out of that? Or like what led up to you becoming an author and just all of the things that you have done?
Right. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot to answer all in one question, but I'll
Yeah, I
have a
just
little
putting
go.
it all out there for you to like.
Sure. I always knew there was something different about my past that I didn't remember, because I couldn't remember so much of my childhood. And I've got 3 brothers and 1 sister, and the brother that I was close to for many years, he couldn't remember his childhood either. And he told me he had been to a hypnotist, he had tried all sorts of things, and he couldn't remember it. And he still to this day doesn't. We had coffee the other day, and he still hasn't remembered. And there's no, you can't force people to remember. It's something that has to come from the person. But with me, I grew up with nightmares. I lived with nightmares. Before, yes, what's the long, the long story short? I just got tired of nightmares. I got to the stage I thought, this is it. I am going to remember. It was an act of will. And I was in my early 20s, I think, at the time. I can't remember exactly what age I was, but I remember I got to the stage, I thought, that is it. I've had enough. Because I would wake up silent, screaming and clinging on to my husband. It was just intense. And when I made that resolution, a memory did come, and I just worked from that. And then God did do something quite unique with me. I started to get a bit worried about what I was remembering. And a friend of mine said she knew someone who was a Christian psychologist, and perhaps I'd like to go and see her, just friend to friend. And so I got to know this lady, and she was the one who took me through all my healing. And in fact, her principles have come out in my 3rd book, How to Counsel, and I've used them with other people and found them very successful. And her main principle was she called them alters, short for alter egos. I know a lot of people resent that name, but I'm stuck with that. I like to call them alters. I mean parts. Parts. She said the alters did all the nasty work when you're in the cult. They're the ones that were called on to be sacrificial, to do the atrocious acts, to stand in for the survivor, so that the survivor could stand back and watch from a distance. Mm-hmm. And so when the survivor starts to heal, they don't want to know the alters, because the alters represent the evil that they went through. The alters had to do all the things that they wish they'd never done. And so the alters get held at a distance, and if they start talking, the host person who hosts these alters just says, talk to the hand. I don't want to know. All my SRA is over. I've made a new life. I'm away from the cult. I don't want to know, and I don't want to hear it. And so you get this person who's divided, and there is resentment from the alters because they want recognition. In a way, they are the homecoming heroes. They are the veterans who've been out fighting the war on behalf of the home host, and they expect to come home and they expect to get at least a little bit of acknowledgement for all they've suffered. But they don't. All they get is, stay away from me. I don't want to know you. I'm a new person now. I'm a Christian. You're the past. And her theory worked for me, because I actually was in that position. Like I said to her, I don't want to know them. And what we did was we started with one altar, and I had to learn to love them. It was the old biblical thing of love your neighbor as yourself. This altar was my neighbor. I had to love this altar. And that was a hard process, but doing it, eventually I got to the stage where I could say, this altar is quite a nice person. I can see they sacrificed themselves for me, and that required a fair amount of, courage. And although they said they were evil, they only did it to save me. They knew they had to convince the cult that we were really evil, so they acted it out and they did it. And that was how we were saved. And I can respect that. I can see they put a lot of effort into saving me, because the point of every altar, every part, is to save the host. It's a God-given thing that when the child suffers all that terrible abuse and they split so that this part that splits off, can help them. And that's the part's sole mission in life, to help the survivor survive, to get through it, so that one day they can leave, they can make their own life. And so one by one, I learnt to love my altars, and I merged with them. When I got to the stage that I truly loved them, truly liked them, then I could merge. And I remember I got to the last one, and the last altar was very angry at me because I had been particularly mean, apparently. I had refused to listen to her for many years. And it was a long process. I didn't like that altar, and I thought, she's evil, she's mean, she's wicked, she's done bad things. I don't want to know her. And it took me quite a long time to realize that she too had only done it for me, and I had to learn to love her. And then I got to the stage that I thought, I don't really want to merge with her, because if I do, I'll lose her as a friend. And I found this with other people too, and with people I've counseled. When they get to that last altar, suddenly it's like, do I really want to lose them? Do I really want to be just one? But I thought about it in the end. I thought, no, I do want to be one. For me, that was the answer. And in the end, I did merge with that altar. And for me, being a singleton suits me very well. I feel very strong in it. At the same time, I can see that other people might prefer to remain a multiple, and I can see why. You're never lonely. There's always intelligent conversation available. It's a different way, and you can switch. I can't switch now. Like if I feel nervous, I've got to face it and think, okay, what am I going to do about this? It's a different way of living. It suits me, and I like it. But it doesn't suit everybody.
Well, your story of integrating and what you just shared is very beautiful. And I think it's going to be very helpful for people to realize that every single part or altar that is a part of someone's system is a protector and did protect the whole self from knowing and from experiencing the whole unbearable things that happened. And whether people fully integrate like you or they keep a few around, it's like some people choose not to integrate because, like you said, it feels lonely. I had some really big integration with lots of littles, and it was like, I'm an adult now. And it's like, I had to learn how to, like be playful without having to have a little part of me come out to do that. And so it's not like we lose those parts because they just like it's kind of like blending,
Mm.
merging
Absolutely.
together,
Yeah.
and then it's like you've accepted and learned to love them, and then
Yeah.
it's just like okay, we're one person.
Yes. Yes, very much so. That's right. But that's just reminded me of something, though, that that really shocked me as a Christian when I found that some Christians, you know how there were one mistake some Christians damage and so much hurt. There's another thing that some Christians do, which is again wrong and again causes a lot of harm. You know how with dissociative identity disorder, you go into denial and you deny all that happened to you. And I believe that's a God given state. It allows the mind to have some rest. And especially for a
Yes.
child, it gives their mind a place of safety. They live in denial, and that's fine. It's a stage. But some
Yes.
Christians say that is sin because it's a lie, and the person who is in denial is sinning, and they have to repent of this sin. It's quite a complex thing. Um, it's yeah, I read about it, and it shocked me that people would think that, but that is a mistake I believe some Christians make. I think instead it's like learning the truth is like a pendulum, and it swings up. Denial is like the place at the top where people live for many years. And then the pendulum swings down quite fast and it swings over the truth, which is at the bottom. And then it swings up again, and again it's in denial. And to me, that's perfectly God given and natural. It gives the mind a wonderful break. And then it swings down again, and again it swings over the truth at the bottom and straight up again, back into denial, and it's safe. But eventually it just swings more and more, less and less, until it finally comes to rest over that truth. But before then, it has to have the rest of going into denial between each side of the truth, if you know what I mean. I mean, if a person
Yes.
gets really shocking memory, they can't always bear it. And so they move back away into denial and they have a rest. And then they come back and look at it again. And eventually they get to accept it. I think acceptance is very important. It doesn't happen
Mhm.
overnight. It's a slow process. You know?
It
Some
is.
people
There's a
have,
lot of.
go ahead.
Go
Mm.
ahead, Cindy.
Well, I was just going to ask a question. I mean, some people have thousands of parts.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would think you can't function with that many parts, right? You have to integrate at least some of your parts, right, to be able to
Mhm.
function in society.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
okay. So, what would you do you think a healed survivor would have like integrated by 90%, or are we talking more, a little less, or
It's an interesting thing. I was talking to someone just the other day who had thousands of parts, and they said that a lot of the smaller parts just voluntarily integrated.
oh, okay.
They still don't. I think they've still got hundreds of parts, but they did have thousands. They said, and someone else I was counselling, they said that I can say this without breaking any confidentiality. She said that it was like she was looking back into a misty, distant, dark sort of past, and how did she describe it? Some of them automatic, just on their own, integrated, and she could see them for a while and then they sort of disappeared into the past. But she knew they hadn't gone anywhere. It was just that they had integrated. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
people.
I've had that happen
Oh,
where
really?
like when what the altar or part was protecting me from, when I have the memories of it, it's like then they just automatically aren't needed anymore and they're not protecting me from anything anymore. So then it just that part really dissolves
Yeah.
into me.
Did
But
you?
then there's people, I've done this in my prayer ministry sessions, where, like I'm asked that do these parts want to go to Jesus and be with him? Or, like kind of integrate into me. And some parts have voluntarily done that, because I don't need them to protect me anymore. And when you talked about the Christian view of, some people, of having like where they think denial is like where you're sinning, like as if it's a lie that the person is living with. I kind of wanted to touch on that because denial is a protection in this case, and it's I really believe it's God's protection for the unbearable. And so we when God brings us to the place where we can heal from what's happened to us, he like lifts that protection a little bit at a time, and he gives us the strength to heal from what happened. So I don't ever think that uh, anyone can say, well, you're living in sin because you're in denial. But I do see where sometimes there's a misunderstanding about this kind of thing, because if a Christian mentions to another Christian sometimes like anything about their abuse, the other person doesn't understand about dissociation. And they might say, well, why are you talking about your past? It's over with. Just put it behind you and forget it. They don't understand um, that very real thing of the protective denial, that, the person like you and I didn't even know that there was any abuse. So when we do know, then we can deal with it and God helps us to heal from it. But that's not living in sin as if we're living a lie. It might feel like we're living a lie, because then when we have memories, it's like, no, I don't want to believe this happened. I don't even want to believe it's true. But then we do accept it. We come to an acceptance. And I think that's the difference between what you were talking about, like where Christians might look at this whole process as, like maybe denial is more like, living a lie.
Yes, I agree with you, and I find the whole thing quite shocking because it's heaping accusations on a survivor who's already struggling with guilt and accusations and self-accusations. Yes, I think these people don't realize either when some. Oh, I'm sort of I'm wandering off now onto a slightly different tangent, but I'm thinking about some Christians don't realize that their parts, if they are survivors, they don't realize how innocent their parts are. I was talking to someone once who had, how the parts are sort of mind controlled by the handlers and by the programmers, and you might get one who's in charge who seems particularly evil or nasty and controlling. People forget, and survivors forget, that every one of those parts came from an innocent child. They split off from a gorgeous, innocent, godly child who would have gone straight to heaven if they'd died,
Yes.
and had to learn to turn on, had to learn to be whatever the cult wanted, but it wasn't their real self. It wasn't their original self. And I think people forget that.
I think that's very important for any survivor that's listening, that will listen to the podcast, that they realize that, because that's what's true. These things happen to children when we're children, and that child is innocent. and they're groomed and trained and mind controlled and tortured and all the things that are done to them, so that every part that's is split off on purpose to be used to try to create someone that will eventually choose to continue, the every single part that is forced to do all of those evil things and is innocent, just like what you said. And when survivors remember the horrible things that they were forced to do, coerced to do, threatened to do, those parts, that person did not have a choice. And they really need to hear that they're not to blame for that. And Jesus, I really do not believe that Jesus, because he is so loving towards children. I don't think for 1 minute that Jesus looked at that little child and thought, "You evil child, look at what you've done." And that's what these abusers do. They do that. They're the ones that are like heaping on the guilt and the shame and the blame for what the abusers forced the child to do. And so then the child grows up thinking, well, an adult telling me how evil and bad I am, so it must be true. And then they're also saying that Jesus or God says, and they use God and Jesus to like manipulate them even further. So I just wanted to share that because it is so important for every survivor to like look at the truth so that they can accept that that child part was innocent, no matter what that child part had to do.
Definitely. Definitely. And the other thing survivors don't realize is that they have tremendous character and strong-mindedness. Anyone who's come out of the cult, when you think of what got thrown at them as children, what you just mentioned, the torture, the drugs, the commands, the hypnosis, the punishment, all to a helpless little child, underneath it all, there must have been some part of their character that just waited for a chance to go. The interest, and when they got that chance, they took it, whether they were an adult, a teenager, whenever. The point is they waited and they took that chance, which is incredible when you consider all they went through to push them the other way. And the other thing that goes with that is some counselors say, we can't break this person's programming. It's too sophisticated, it's too deep, it's too many layered. We thought there was just one mansion where all these altars were living, but now we discover there's several and they're all connected, and there's trapdoors and there's underground passages and there's demons guarding them, and they can't break them and we can't break them. And some therapists actually say this to some unfortunate survivors: we can't break the programming, as if it's, the point is they're forgetting that their client, if they came out of the cult and became a Christian, has already broken the programming. Because when you think about it, the biggest programming of all, I think, centers on silence. That's the amethyst programming, I think. And they break that when they talk to the counselor. They get programmed to stay in the cult for life. They break that. They get programmed to commit suicide when they start remembering. They break that. They choose to live instead. They get programmed to remember nothing because the parts can't talk to each other. Well, eventually they start to remember. They break that. They get programmed to stay a Satanist forever. And these false vows are extracted. Well, they break that and they become a Christian. They have comeback codes. When they leave the cult, they get sent texts and phone calls and things. They don't obey those. They break those. And they break all those programmings before they even meet a counsellor or a therapist. So that comes from the survivor alone. Of course they can break the programs. It's just another deception that they can't.
I have a
Yeah.
couple of questions. Sorry.
Yay. No, I'm
Um,
just celebrating that
I am
truth.
too. That's such good news, right? Because we have a client who says trap doors were set. In fact, if he tries to be healed and integrated, bad stuff will happen. Like he's convinced he's going to die. And so he's not open to certain methodologies, therapies that could really help him. And I think, how sad is that? But I
Mm.
guess that's just another program as well,
Yes.
running. So, what I wanted to ask is, does each individual part need to accept Jesus as their savior?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? I remember when I was integrating myself many, many years ago now. It is a long time ago, decades ago. But I remember that I felt that way about my altars, that they ought to become Christians, and that I had a responsibility as a Christian to lead them the right way and to lead them to Christ. And I found that they already knew him and he knew them, even the evil one. And I was actually quite put out, especially with the one who was quite evil at the end. I thought, how can he know her and be so familiar with her when I'm the Christian here and she's the one, she's the one who's angry at me and did all these things. I believe that Jesus usually knows those parts already because they're just parts of a child, and they did their best. And yeah, do I believe they all have to convert? That's a good question. I I just got the impression Jesus already knew them and that they were Christians. But when they became Christians, I can't tell.
And
But
also, do survivors need to repent of their
of
sin?
of their sin. Well,
Yeah.
that gets back to that one I mentioned earlier about the secular counsel not being able to help with guilt because the person couldn't get rid of it, even though they cognitively knew that it was not their guilt; it was the guilt of the adults. Um, so sorry, what was the question again? I got lost.
Well, I
About
guess
repentance.
Oh, repentance. Yeah,
repentance. Yeah.
to me, I mean, I went through this as well. I guess I'm in quite a strong position because I did go through the counselling. But my counsellor said, well, if you still feel you're guilty, you can ask God's forgiveness. And I did that. I said, I treated it as my sin. And I said, God, I'm sorry that I took it all to the cross and I apologize. And of course, Romans 5 tells us he will forgive us all our sins if we confess them. There's quite a few verses that tell us that. So I think it's, as far as repentance goes, I don't know, maybe that's a bit strong. I wasn't going to do it again, but I did want God's forgiveness. And
I can
that's,
sort of answer that question too, from my perspective. Earlier, when you were talking about how Jesus knows those parts and they somehow know him, um, I think because Jesus is the truth, that he sees what's being done and he sees that child's heart that's does not have any motives or intentions of doing any of those things. And so while all of that is happening, even though the front parts of us might not know Jesus like they do, it's like they they are closer to his heart than we are. I believe that for myself. And so when okay, so these abusers, the evil behind it is, I don't want to focus on the abusers themselves, but the evil behind it all gets a child to go against what they know about God who created them, to get them to go against their own heart. And so Jesus knows that child. A child is so close to God and Jesus. Any person that looks at a baby or a child, they're just like in awe of them, like they gather around them and they see the love coming from a child, that's and the innocence. And so um the thing is, like, when we have parts of us that we connect with them that did such evil, it's just like, how can I accept them? Jesus isn't going to accept them. But like, when I accepted Jesus, any part of me did, it was like, then it was like um, then more of me accepting more of me and forgiving those parts of me that, then it's like, each part felt so badly about what we were forced to do that then it was kind of an automatic thing that, oh, I feel so bad. God, please forgive me. Some part of me would say, God, please forgive me. So it was kind of like maybe not a formal repentance, but it was a repentance
Yeah.
because we're gaining back more of our heart. And most survivors have such a compassionate, loving heart, unless they've been completely taken over by evil, that I think we're inside of us, we're repenting all the time once we connect with any part of us that, like, because we do have the Holy Spirit in us. It's like it's a manifestation of the Holy Spirit, like that we're always seeking more truth, seeking God. And that's kind of my long answer there. Sorry. But
Yes, when you said forgiveness and learning to forgive the parts, that is important, and forgive themselves. Well, yes, yeah, forgive the parts, forgive themselves. But I think also the whole thing of forgiveness is another advantage that Christian counselors and survivors have, because secular counselors don't want to talk to it. It's as if forgiveness is a bad word, a swear word. You don't want to talk to they don't want to talk to the clients about forgiving the abusers, because that would just be so wrong, and there's a lot of talk about how it can take years, and perhaps you never need to forgive them anyway because they don't deserve forgiveness. I think Christians have a much better time there, because we know we can define forgiveness in a different way, and we have to forgive our abusers, because the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. So that's actually a command from God, and we have to work our way around it and find a way to do it. And I do, in fact, think this relieves our spirit when we get to that point. We work out how and why to forgive, and then we receive God's forgiveness in return. It's part of it.
yeah, and sometimes I've had where I've connected with parts that they feel like they've done the unforgivable. And so the they feel like they can't be forgiven, but they're more apt to forgive the abuser. But then I think that sometimes Christians want us to forgive too soon. And then
Right.
there's the other side where the counselor might be saying, well, you don't have to ever forgive. That's not something you can even forgive. But
Yeah.
I connected with a couple times with different parts that were like, what I was remembering was too awful. I couldn't forgive. So that part of me, even though I forgave, that
mm,
part of me was like, Father, forgive them for they didn't know what they did to me. You're going to have to do it because I can't right now.
yeah,
And then I think eventually we just all, like realized it's more like coming to an acceptance of that
yeah,
type of evil.
yes. Yeah. It's an interesting thing how people. I agree with you, and I know when I was in the prison and taking groups with women in the women's prison, they had nearly always suffered sexual abuse, and some of their childhoods were horrific, even without including satanic ritual abuse. And when we talked about forgiveness, they had this weird concept that if you forgave someone, it meant you had to have them back in your lives and you had to love them and hug them and just have them around. And we were saying, no, that's not what forgiveness is about. And we would talk about the fact that Jesus, when he was with the Pharisees, would tell them exactly what he thought of them, and he didn't go up and hug them and be sweet to them. And love doesn't necessarily mean just being kind and sweet and nice. It's Jesus wasn't like that. He was clear and truthful. He said what he thought of the Pharisees, and I've often wondered if they were Satanists because he said you're just hypocritical. What do you say? Whitewashed walls full of dead men's bones and all kinds of filth. He said you're open graves that people walk over without knowing. And I thought, goodness, those descriptions could apply to Satanists who carry out satanic ritual abuse because often they're high up in society, they're well dressed, they're well presented, nobody knows. It's the same sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's safe for survivors to reconcile with an abuser if that abuser is still, you know, actively connected to the network, and because all the progress that they make could be undone if they, connect with them. But there's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. You can forgive an abuser, but you don't necessarily have that relationship that you would with somebody that is safe.
That's a really good definition, Sherry. I hadn't thought of before that reconciliation is different to forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I mean, these women in prison, some of whom had had their bones broken by abusive husbands. And we as Christians, there we are advising them to leave the husband. And I thought afterwards, I thought, gosh, what are they going to think of us as Christians? But I remember one woman, and everyone, us included, advised her to leave the guy and go to the other end of the country to some distant relatives and start afresh with her children because it would have been, she could forgive him in her mind. We went over this and she prayed about it and so on, and she forgave him for what he had done, but she also drew a line and said, no more. You um, it happened, yes, it happened, and I forgive him for that, but I'm not going to let him do it again to me or my children. And we as Christians sanctioned that, rightly or wrongly, but that was the way we saw it. Mm.
Well, you're unburdening yourself when you forgive. Forgiveness isn't for the benefit of the perpetrator, it's for your own benefit. It helps
Mm.
you heal faster, better. It's for yourself. I
Yeah.
I've heard survivors get very offended when we say you need to forgive your perpetrators.
Mm.
Yeah, that's always been upsetting to some, and we've said, wait a second, forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's for
It's right.
your
Yes.
well-being.
Right.
Um, and they lighten up. But I mean, I even as an everyday Christian, I screw up and I want to be forgiven. So I'm going
Mm.
to extend forgiveness to people. It is hard. Like there's
Mm.
some people that I'm very angry with right now who've hurt me. And I have to will myself to forgive them. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like it. I don't think they deserve it. But Father,
Mm.
I'm going to will myself to forgive them. And someday my feelings will catch up with my mind and my heart. And I've had to ask God to just help me forgive. I need your help because I can't do this on my own.
Mm.
And once I truly let go and let God handle whatever was done for me, I feel so much better. I just
Oh,
like,
Yeah.
I feel free. I feel relieved. I feel like I
Mhm.
can take
mm.
a deep
Yes.
breath and just
Yeah.
let go and let God.
What you said, Cindy, is so good. It is a choice that we
Yeah.
make, and it is for our benefit. God knew. That's why he, you know, says what he says, to forgive, like we've been forgiven. Because otherwise, like, there's righteous anger at what was done to us. And we are going to go through feeling the anger and feeling the rage, even. But if we hold that all inside of us, and there's hatred and bitterness and resentment and just, like wanting them, like wanting to repay evil for evil and just all the things that can happen, just like we're told in the Bible not to let the sun go down on our anger, because the anger that builds up will turn
Mm.
into all of these other things. But if we release, have the feelings, and then, like process them in safe ways, not harming any other people, we can get to a point where we can choose to forgive, even if it's a thing we will and choose, even if we don't feel it. But if we don't, we are like drinking poison. It's like drinking
Mm.
poison, expecting the other person to die. And it only like kills ourself inside. And it's not good for us to carry that around. And
Yes.
choosing to forgive the abusers doesn't mean that gets them off the hook. Because when
No.
we choose to forgive and we let go, like Cindy said, and give all of that into God's hands, because He's the judge, He's the one that saw everything, and He knows it's wrong. It doesn't mean they get away with what they did.
No. No, not at all.
Yeah.
No. And something you said there, Sherry, really reminded me of. I remember this woman who was in prison, and she'd only been given 2 years in prison, which you could see the judge was on her side. But what had happened was she had found her partner sexually molesting her 2-year-old, and she had attacked him with a knife and done some serious damage. Um, and that's what anger can lead to, if we don't
Yes.
back off. But she was given 2 years, so she misses out on 2 years. She had two small children. She misses out on 2 years of their life. I mean, I think God knew that if we didn't forgive, our anger could lead to terrible things, and things that
Yes.
were not beneficial for the innocent party. She was the innocent party, but she had to suffer 2 years in jail. I mean, he also got prosecuted, but as far as the what you were saying about the fact that our forgiving them doesn't let them off the hook, that is so true. I've actually had visions of hell, one or two, and it's put me in this sort of position that I would not wish it on anybody. It's that it's I actually regard it as a blessing. I can forgive my abusers easily. It's almost like if I could see them, I would say to them, don't, don't, you have no idea what's going to happen to you. I mean, being burnt is terrible, but being burnt really does happen in hell. It's exactly like hell is like Jesus said it was. It's being burnt, and it goes on for minute after minute after hour, torture, day and night. There is no escape. And that's what Jesus said it was like, but for some reason people forget it. They forget that these abusers that abuse them are going to suffer that. It's much worse than anything they could dream up. But that's what's going to happen to them.
When
Carry on.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sylvia. I just wanted to add something that God showed me that was very helpful to forgive, even though like there's a trauma bond and a love for the abuser that, is a very real love because we connect with the abuser when it's parents, especially. But we can't do this too soon because it doesn't work, or we are going to bypass the process of recovery and healing. But at some point during our recovery, if we can actually see our abuser the way that God sees them, especially as the child that they were, with whatever happened to them originally. And if you could look at a picture of a little child or the abuser as that little child, even if it's in your mind, the way God sees that person, he wants no person to perish. But he saw every single thing that was done to that person that caused them to be that way. And when I could really see that with every single abuser, it was like, oh my gosh, this has got to be in God's hands because he knows their heart. He knows every single thing about them. He knows every single thing about me. And when I could completely disconnect myself and the trauma bond and the soul ties and everything was like separated, it's like the abuse was no longer connecting us. And then I could let go of them and let God have it, all, and have them. And then it was like, I did not want any of my abusers to go to hell. But it's not on me. It's not on any survivor out there. We're not responsible for any of the choices that anyone else has made. And we can only live our lives from today on. But I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that stuff gets so tangled with the trauma bonding and the soul ties and all the responsibility of everything. And I think forgiveness helps to disentangle all of that and separate it all out. Because our autonomy is so important to have the freedom to know that we're separate. We're separate from the abuser, but we're separate from the abuse. We're separate from because we don't know that until we have the healing and the wisdom from God to be able to sort that all out.
To be honest, I don't think any of the people I've counseled would have liked the idea of my saying, let's feel sorry for the person who abused you because they had a bad childhood. Because the thing is that 1 in 4, at least 1 in 4 women are abused in childhood and 1 in 6 men. And they do not all turn into nasty people. Most of them don't. And the groups that I took of women who had been sexually abused in childhood, the recovery groups, they were lovely people. They would never have harmed a soul, let alone a child. So to sort of say that the reason they're so bad is because they were abused in childhood, I don't think that's always a very helpful thing for a survivor to hear.
No.
Because what I'm saying is most survivors don't go that way. There is a choice involved,
Yeah.
Actually,
And
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
sometimes perpetrators did this with me where they wanted me to feel sorry for them. I was supposed to feel sorry for them and not anything for myself. So yeah, I
yeah,
don't think it's helpful for survivors in counseling,
mm,
or, maybe even hearing this would not be helpful for them. But this is just something that God showed me, that
yeah,
then when I got to a place where I could see that, it,
yeah.
it just helped me to understand
Oh, sure.
where where that happened.
And I
Yeah.
feel sorry when I consider they are going to hell. I do feel sorry for them because there is no way back. All the time we're on earth, there's hope. All the time they're on earth, they can choose, but they make that final step beyond the grave, and they cannot. There is no help for them. I was looking at some of the things that non-Christians said on their deathbed, and who was that chap who started? Was it Satan? Was it Anton LaVey? I think it was him who said on his, it was either him or the other big guy, I can't remember his name, on his
Aleister
deathbed.
Crowley?
Well,
Aleister Crowley? Were you
it might
thinking
have
of
been
Aleister Crowley?
said on their deathbed something about things being terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Yeah.
something being terribly wrong? Did you read that too?
Yes,
And
I
I
read that too.
thought
What
it's
is it?
too late.
Something's terribly wrong. And I don't know who said this one too. They said like, oh dear, I think I've made a mistake. That was,
Oh,
but I can't remember who said that. So
oh
yeah, I
my.
mean, even
I
before their heart stops,
yes,
the
they know.
demons could be coming after them.
Oh, and they know it. I saw a wonderful YouTube testimony the other day of a man who was 99 years old when he found the Lord. And he hadn't been a Satanist, but he had persuaded people not to believe in Christianity all his life. And he was this thin little old man, and he was so full of joy. And at 99, he had found the Lord. I thought, well done, just in the nick of time. Talk about
Yeah.
cutting time. And there he was a Christian. And apparently, Jesus said to him, you've worked for the enemy all your life, but now you need to work for me. And in the little bit of time that he had left, he'd made this video of him getting baptized. And it was just so beautiful. I cried. It was just lovely. And I thought, goodness, talk about cutting it fine. 99 years
Yeah.
old.
Got in
Wow.
by the skin of his teeth, right?
Yeah. I do want to apologize to survivors that may have heard what I was talking about, like what God showed me. I do want to say this, that what abusers do is a choice, that is evil, it's wrong, there's no excuse for it. And I am sorry if I gave anyone the impression that somehow, in with my compassion or empathy or understanding, that, or that they have to feel that way with their abusers. We're all different, and God shows us different things at different times. So I wanted to make that clear, and let people know that that wasn't my intention at all.
I'd totally back that up. I know Sherry is this wonderfully compassionate, welcoming, loving Christian, one of the most loving I know. So I can understand that Sherry would feel compassion for her abusers. She would. She was on a cross, she'd say, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. I'd be saying,
Yes.
this is wrong. Stop. This is absolutely wrong. We're all different. We're all different. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Dr. Sylvia, I'm assuming you were abused since you were a child. And was
Mm.
it a family member who did the abuse? Or
I was um I was given to the cult. So it was
from birth?
mainly no, I think I was older than that. I'm one of these people that doesn't I'm going to create a lot of controversy here. I'm one of these people that believe you can't remember things before about the age of 3, and I think I think it's meant to be that way, but I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. This is a controversial area. So the earliest I can remember is about 3. So I've got no way of knowing what happened before then. Yes. So it was my abuse was monarch programming and being trafficked, but it took place within, I was part of the cult. It was done by people in the cult. Yeah.
Gotcha. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask. I wrote it down. What is the difference between Monarch programming and MK Ultra?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, MK Ultra was, after World War II, Mengele and I think about 1,600 scientists and doctors were transported from Germany to application for the project. They were trying to produce a Manchurian candidate, and they said if they could do this, I think there was a movie made in the 60s called The Manchurian Candidate that picked up the
Yes.
same idea.
Yep.
Yeah. And the idea was, they said, if they could have produced a Manchurian candidate, then Hitler could have been killed and World War II could have been prevented. So it was justified. But in actual fact, it was all about mind control. That was MK Ultra. And we all used to think MK Ultra stood for mind control, ultra mind control, and the K was a nod to German origins, control spelled with a K. But I was reading the other day that actually it didn't refer to that. It referred to something else, which I can't remember what it is now. But anyway, after World War II, these 1,600 people, scientists, doctors, were taken over to work with the CIA. And at first it was called something else, Operation Paperclip, and then something else. And then from 1953 to 1973, it was called MK Ultra. And that was mind control all the way. Now, mind control with drugs, torture, deprivation, the whole works. And Satanists were working there as well. And so when in 1973 it became known and denounced in public, I don't understand your government, but something in your Senate or something like that denounced it.
Yeah,
And
the church committee.
yeah, and in 73, the leader of the CIA officially destroyed, or theoretically, in theory, destroyed all the documents with
Yeah.
MK Ultra. But
Very.
Yeah.
you can find it on the internet. All you've got to do is put an MK Ultra, and up it all comes. It's all there. A lot of it's been redacted, but it's still there. Anyway, the Monarch programming came out of MK Ultra, and it's pretty standardized. It's used all over the world. There's been bits added to it with technological advances, the 3D headgear and all that sort of thing.
So was MK Ultra a project like Operation Paperclip, and then the Monarch programming came out of all of that?
Yes, Monarch programming.
Okay. So
There's a lot more.
one of the questions I had is a lot of survivors will claim that they are CIA agents or operatives. Where does that come from? And is there any truth to that?
There you go. That's the question. And some people believe they have been in the same way. Some people believe that when they were children, they were trafficked all over the world, and the pet child of, say, the King of England, plus the president of all sorts of different countries. And the point is, if you bring all those survivors together and add up all their stories, they probably couldn't all be true. But we don't know, we can't tell. My belief is that once a child has been drugged and tortured and beaten and abused and sexually violated and put through monarch programming, they can be made to believe almost anything. If someone with a little moustache and small glasses rapes them and they're told this is Hitler and everyone treats him as if he's Hitler, the child will believe that's Hitler and they'll grow up with that belief even though Hitler's dead. So my belief is that a child can be made to believe anything at the time and they keep it. And it may be true, it may not be true. We just don't know.
Right.
We can't prove one way or the other. And I certainly wouldn't say to someone, well, you're wrong. You couldn't have been
Yeah.
servicing the President of the United States and in the same day the King of England, even if you did fly by jet. It didn't happen. But I wouldn't say so because what's there to gain? What do you
Something
think?
that does happen is that these children, any of us survivors, are trained and groomed to become whatever. But during that training, they're causing us to believe that we already are CIA spies or assassins, or that we have, through virtual reality or just other things like along with the drugging, that we've been on planes. I have had memories of thinking that I was, now this is one of my programmed things that was done to me to get me in and out of places that I would be taken to when I was trafficked. And so this is something I can answer that question with as far as me personally. So during the process of the programming breaking down, I thought when I was going out the door that I was getting off of an airplane. And so that was the belief. So that as long as I kept, as long as the programming wasn't all broken down, which I don't know if it ever is completely broken down unless you're integrated and whole, um, there's going to be a part of you that thinks that you've been trafficked maybe all over the world, because that is like the training as you get mind controlled is how they get away with it. Like I'm getting on the airplane versus I'm going into a hotel room, or I'm coming off an airplane versus I'm coming out of a hotel room. So it's like hearts are trained and programmed, in my case, to believe those things. But I can honestly say that I don't think I was ever trafficked all over the world. I don't think I was ever put on real airplanes. It was like the things that I was programmed to believe. The parts of me that kept things hidden from the front person.
Yeah.
Which is
But that
why
doesn't
it's very
mean it
difficult. Oh,
wasn't,
okay.
but that doesn't mean it wasn't something that someone else experienced.
Right. Is something. Yes.
Well, I was going to say there is a quite a famous survivor who told me that at 9 years old she was trained to fly a plane, and she really thinks she flew a plane at 9, which is virtually impossible. She wouldn't even been able to touch the pedals on the plane. So I can understand why this is such a dilemma for prosecution because we don't really know.
No.
Yeah.
We don't have 100% uh, accuracy on what a survivor is telling us or what a part is telling us. The other problem is one part might say one thing and then another part might say completely opposite. Well, you can't have a case in court when you got two opposing views, or if you don't have accurate views, especially if you can prove that there's no way they could have done this. Because survivors have said, "Oh, I went through a portal, and I went through a worm. I've been to other planets. I've been, in the special airplane that got me from here to Paris in just 10 minutes. We hear that all the time. And so that's why it is difficult to get cases going and perpetrators prosecuted and convicted, and they know this, right? So that's why they make sure the statutes of limitations are so short that no survivor could get healed, remember all their memories, and be strong enough to stand before their perpetrator and a jury all within 4 years. So, this is how they get away with it. This is why people don't get prosecuted.
Yeah.
We've got that problem we need to solve, and that is what
Yeah.
has prevented us from getting any real big case here in Utah, just for that reason. And it breaks my heart because we've talked to
Yeah.
hundreds of survivors. We know they're telling the truth, but it's just these little nuances and just little facts that are off that can throw the whole case. And a defense attorney will rip into that survivor and the judge will drop the case. It's
Yeah.
happened time and time and time again. So,
Uh,
yeah, these people are smart. They're
It
very,
they
is,
are,
and that
and it's,
person's sorry.
I was just going to say to Cindy that it's so, just like you believe the survivors, and it's important to believe them, and it's important for survivors to believe their parts. But just like with the airplane thing, we don't always necessarily have to believe everything that a part tells us when we know that a 9-year-old part could have been put in an airplane and told that they're flying, and just let them play. But we do have to believe survivors, but yet some of the things that we are, as survivors, are told are unbelievably inaccurate, and some of it is believably true. Unbelievably.
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I really like what Cindy was saying about the courts because I believe that
Yes.
the Satanists really go to lengths. They love deception. It says in the Bible that Satan masquerades as an angel of light, and it tells us
Yes.
also in the Bible that his followers will do the same thing. And they do, they masquerade in public as respectable Christian citizens. It's very annoying.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the actual child and all the brainwashing and so on, the mind control, they do do things like I've heard of what are they the spaceship thing where they dress up as aliens and
Yeah.
take the child into what they tell them is a spaceship. And they know that if the child tells anyone they've been taken away by aliens and gone on a spaceship, that no one's going to believe them. So they act that out. That's just one that springs to mind, but I know there are others. They do.
Yeah, and there's a big agenda. I think evil is behind that. There's all these people even getting into the belief about alien invasions coming, and a lot of it stems from what survivors were told. Um,
That, mm-hmm.
Well, we
Yes.
are coming up to 4 o'clock, ladies. We've been talking for
we
quite some
are.
time.
It's
Um,
been really great. I really enjoyed talking to you ladies. It's been,
yeah, we're gonna have you back.
oh, Beck.
Yes.
Can can we do a part two with you, Dr. Sylvia?
Well, that would be lovely. I'd be honored. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll schedule you for after the new year then.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much more I would love to know about your personal story. If that's okay, you don't have to name names or anything, but just to learn of your wisdom too about what you see. The one of the questions I wanted to ask, so we're not going to have time to do this. I'm like, Why do the perpetrators always send survivors to psych wards? And they always send them for about a week or two, which is illegal in Utah, by the way. But and survivors have told us it's because they're being reprogrammed and they're giving drugs that erase their memory, and then they're compliant again when they come out. I'd love to talk more about that with you
Yes,
the
I'm
next time that we talk.
sure.
So awesome.
It's
Awesome.
been a real privilege talking with you ladies today, and I feel I've learned a lot as well. So it'd be a pleasure to come
Before
back.
we Thank you so much, Sylvia. Before we end the podcast, what one thing would you want listeners to know about you beyond your survival story?
Oh, beyond my survival story, parts is the most important thing a survivor can do. That's my that's what I've come to believe. That's what I'd like people to know.
Can you
Loving
say that again?
loving
Because
the
your screens had froze and the audio was lagging a little bit.
oh, okay. Am I back?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would like survivors to know that the most important thing they can do is love their parts. Take them out to dinner, find out what their favorite food is, do what they want to do, be there for them, love them. That's what I want people to know.
That's beautiful. Can you say your books again, Sylvia, and where people can find them?
Okay, that's what they look like. That's how to heal, how to triumph, and how to counsel, and they're all on Amazon. If they look up Dr. Sylvia Pack, they'll all be there.
Okay. I'll put those in the show notes so people can find them after they watch your podcast.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. And so on the list of where people can connect with you, I see you have a YouTube channel at Dr. Sylvia Pack. And then I'll get these to Cindy and then she can put these in the comments or somewhere in the description.
And also, yes, they can contact me through that. Yes, they can.
Is there a preferred method of where people can connect with you that
I'm
you
happy.
check regularly?
Yeah, I'm happy for people to email me, sylvia@sylviapack.com.
Okay.
And I do reply. Occasionally I miss one, but I always come back and check, and I do reply.
It's been wonderful having you here today, Dr. Sylvia.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.